Here we are at the Aninga Trail in Everglades National Park in southern Florida. We saw some truly amazing things at this section of the park.
The Everglades is the third largest park in North America, consisting of 1.5 million acres and over 10,000 islands. Over 200,000 of those acres are primarily used for the growing and harvesting of sugarcane. Scientists believe that people have lived here for about 11,000 years using every possible resource that the Everglades has to offer, such as its clean water and wide range of animals.
One of the first things we saw in the Everglades was an American alligator, calmly lying in the sun, and since alligators are cold-blooded reptiles, they depend upon the sun to keep them warm and to have energy to search for food.
Mother alligators are extremely protective of their young, and as you can see, they need her protection because they are so small they have no way of defending themselves from older male alligators who would eat them.
In fact, until the baby gators are big enough to fend for themselves, their mother will not venture far from the nest.
The Everglades is also chock full of insects. Thousands and thousands of species are thought to coexist in this area. Among them is the giant grasshopper. It can reach lengths of up to 6 inches. The bright fuchsia coloring on the wings serves as a warning to predators who plan on eating them. It tells them that it does not taste very good.
If you ever visit the Everglades, you will notice the hundreds of little lizards scurrying around all over the place. Down here, they come in 2 species, the bigger native green anole, which is becoming less populous, and the Cuban brown anole, which is much more plentiful.
The Everglades is actually an extremely wide, very shallow river. Its average depth is only 6 inches.
In the ever-moving water, there are lots of Florida gar, a species of fish found in these waters that was not originally from this area. As the Everglades yield to fish introduced by humans, the number of native fish are dwindling.
We also saw a few birds, one of them being the greenback. This bird is very intelligent and is a close relative of the stork. However, its legs are much shorter and it tends to stay near the water where it hunts for small fish.
These birds are so intelligent that they have developed a way of fishing that would astonish some people. As people throw bread at them to eat, the bread lands in the water. And since the greenback does not eat bread, the fish in the water come up to eat the bread.
As they do so, the greenback swoops down off the branch and snatches up the fish. Over time, they have learned to steal bread from picnickers and drop it in the water themselves, thus making fishing a whole lot easier for them.
Well, we've seen some truly amazing animals here at the Aninga Trail. So, off to our next stop, the Pinelands.
Now we've arrived at the Pinelands section of the park. This area was a definite change of scenery from what we saw at the Aninga Trail.
That's right. The Pinelands really reflects its namesake. There are pine trees everywhere. But they look a lot different from the ones we're used to seeing back home. Why is that?
The reason they look a lot different is because the pinelands are burned frequently either by the park or by nature. In fact, the Everglades is the lightning strike capital of the country, which sparks many fires every year.
But Greg, why would the park do something like that?
Well, Kyle, they burn the area in order to control the vegetation growth and keep the hammock that borders the pinelands from entering into it. And also to keep certain species of plants that only thrive in the rather open pinelands from becoming extinct.
Wow, Greg, that's really something. But look over there. See the uprooted tree? Why are the roots wrapped around a big hunk of rock?
That big hunk of rock is called limestone, and it's the only rock found here in the Everglades. The reason the roots are wrapped around it is that there is very little soil near the surface, so the roots are forced to grow around the rocks in search of soil.
The limestone also acts as a filter to purify the water as it seeps down through the ground. Here you are seeing a view of an underground lake of fresh water that has been cleaned by the limestone.
On our way to the next park, we encountered an eastern diamondback rattlesnake lying on the road. Why do you suppose he was out on the road when he could have gotten hit by a car at any second?
Eastern diamondback rattlesnakes, like all reptiles, are cold-blooded, which means they need sunlight to keep warm and for energy. The reason he was lying on the road is that since the road is black, it attracts heat, which warms up the snake much faster than if it were in the grass.
Why is he curling up in a pile? He looks awfully angry.
The reason he is curled up is that he is angry. This curling up motion is called the strike position. It means that he is ready to strike at any moment and serves as a warning to the other animals that they need to back off and give him some room.
Wow, that was pretty cool. Now, let's get our senses back together and head off to our next area, the mahogany hammock.
Well, Greg, we finally arrived in Mahogany Hammock. Actually, walking into the hammock itself was quite an experience. It felt as though you were walking back in time to the Jurassic period.
Yeah, that did seem pretty prehistoric. What's that stuff Ranger Larry is holding in his hands?
That stuff is called periphyton, and it comes from the Greek word meaning almost plant. This periphyton is a combination of plants that hold water, much like a sponge. The periphyton floats on top of the water, and when the dry season comes to the Everglades, the water retained in the sponge-like clump provides essential nutrients and moisture to the exposed plants, keeping them alive.
Wow, I didn't know that a piece of floating pond scum could be so important, but I sure do now.
Look at that huge tree. There's so much growing on it. What kind of tree is that?
Well, that tree is called a mahogany. Maybe some of you have it in your homes. It's used to make furniture, cabinets, and floors. Those plants growing on it are called epiphytes, and they range from short plants that look like the tops of pineapples to tiny little sprigs of grass-like moss.
How big is it?
This particular tree is actually called a champion tree. It is the largest mahogany in all of the United States. Before Hurricane Andrew in 1992, it actually stood 40 feet taller than its current height. Look at that tree over there. Do you know why that one tree is wrapping itself around the other?
Yeah, it's called a strangler fig, and it really is an amazing tree. It starts out by birds or wind dropping the seedlings on top of the host tree. From there, it grows downwards, wrapping itself around its host, eventually outcompeting it for sunlight, and the host tree dies. The mahogany is one of the rarest trees in the country, and one of the most expensive types of wood.
Kyle, did you know that the Everglades is the only subtropical national park here in the United States? Well, we're off to our next stop, mangrove forest in the West Lake region. See you there. Well, we finally made it to the mangrove and West Lake region. Yuck, what's that terrible smell?
That terrible smell is the smell of the Everglades. In this particular region, the salt water from the ocean meets the fresh water from the lake and the rivers. The mangrove tree roots keep the water from moving very much, which causes it to become stagnant. When this happens, the water starts to smell like rotten eggs.
Man, that stinks. What are those funny shaped trees called?
Those trees are called mangroves, and they come in 3 varieties: white, black, and red. And they all have unique and different ways of getting rid of the salt in the water in which they live. The red mangroves grow closest to the water and are the most salt tolerant. They have green tips on the leaves and bear live berries. The white mangroves grow behind the red ones and have little knobs on the stems of the leaves that remove the salt. Lastly is the black mangrove. This tree is very distinguishable from the others because the leaves are coated in a light layer of salt and taste salty when you lick them. Just make sure you don't accidentally lick poison ivy while you're at it. Also, the trunk is a very dark black color, and they have the telltale roots jutting up out of the water.
Wow, you sure do know a lot about mangroves. But did you know that mangroves are known as the nurseries for our waterways? Their root system provides a great habitat for many species of fish and other animals. I've heard that certain species of trees are considered viparous. What does that mean?
Well, Viviparous means that the mother gives birth to live young. The white mangrove is one of these species. Instead of dropping seeds that require fertilization, they drop what are called saplings that are already alive and ready to grow once they hit the water.
While the Everglades is still a huge park, it is only about 1/5 of its original size, mainly because of human destruction.
Well, we've come up on West Lake. Ranger Larry said that there are so many lakes here in the Everglades that no one has ever taken the time to actually count all of them. Here, we got to sample one of the country's most endangered phenomenon, silence.
To add to all of that, the mangrove is a government-protected tree, and it is illegal to cut one down due to its importance as being the first line of defense against a hurricane here in the Everglades.
We've sure learned a lot so far, but I want to know more. So, let's head on down to our last and final destination, Flamingo. We finally arrived at our last destination, Flamingo. This is the southernmost point we visited here in the Everglades National Park.
Here we found some neat birds of prey. Kyle, what's that big black bird over there?
That bird is known as a black American vulture. You can also see an osprey and our national bird, the bald eagle. Over on the bank you can see an American crocodile, which is very endangered.
This park was in no way prepared for the devastation Hurricane Katrina brought to the area. Since no preparations were made, the area took a devastating blow, and all of the buildings and tourist areas were damaged, so no visitors were to be found. Well, I'm tired and pretty hungry, so let's bid farewell to Everglades National Park.
But don't worry, we'll be back someday.